Welcome to the Sacred Healing Podcast, where the old is new, the ancient is innovative, and the forgotten is remembered. We believe that sacred healing is your birthright. Join us on each episode as we uniquely, authentically, and mystically dive into the bold and vulnerable life of many magical humans. From breath, spirituality, shadow work, and all things in the esoteric realm of healing, we don't leave any stone unturned on this bold journey of growth as we start to explore the remembrance of what it means to be human. So take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, and let's get sacred.
Hello, Sacred Family. Today I am chatting with a wonderful soul named Nicholas Wong, or simply known in his community as Soul Dr. Nick. And first and foremost, he's a father and a husband who considered his family his greatest teachers. And they remind him daily of his mission to expand joy and wonder and Ohana, which is the Hawaiian word for family. And it's also the name of his new breathwork company. And after decades of training and his work as a medical doctor and a scientist and a life coach, he ventured down the path of spiritual plant medicine and breathwork. Through some amazing healers and shamans, Nick actually healed himself from his lifelong asthma, which is something his medical mind had previously deemed almost impossible. This miracle led him to really walk down the path of his dharma, and he is the founder of Ohana Breath, a space to bring people into their own experiential healing, both in person and virtually. And his guiding principle for doing this work is having fun, as spiritual work doesn't have to be all that serious. Nowadays, Nick is both a medical doctor as well as a medicine man, and he combines both to create deeply safe and transformational spaces of healing. And he has grand visions of his future, which include breathwork sessions for over thousands of participants, which I will be participating in. Nick, you've got my vote. And he's also looking forward to leading a future journey into Egypt. And one of the fun facts about Nick is that he wants to free dive with whales, which I think is so cool. And with all this said, Nick is also a deep listener. He's somebody that holds space for people. He builds trust through deep eye contact and making people feel really comfortable in just being their authentic versions of themselves. And we talk about a lot on this episode. So I'm really excited for you guys to dive deep into the journey of what it is to be a medicine man. Enjoy this episode with Nicholas Wong, aka Soul Dr. Nick.
Get into it.
Take a breath.
And land here with Jessica.
Thank you.
It's funny. This is the first time I'm I'm usually nervous whenever it's something important. So that's a good thing. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to get to chat with you today. So welcome, Sacred Humans, to the Sacred Healing Podcast. Today we have Nick. Nick is a medical doctor and a soul doctor and a medicine man. He's a friend. And I've had the honor and privilege of co-facilitating breathwork in spaces with Nick, which has been just so nourishing because he's filled with wonder and filled with curiosity and so much passion for what he does in his healing practices. And he uses so many tools, some of which I'm like, what is that? And he just constantly helps me learn and evolve and grow in my own practice. And so, yeah, thank you, Nick, for coming on the show. It's so wonderful to have you and see your face and see your cut hair.
It's growing back after the shaving. I know. It was important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would love for you to introduce yourself in your own words, and then we can get into some of the deep, juicy stuff because I'm gonna go deep. I'm not gonna hold back.
Mm,
And I know that you are on board with that always.
yes, yes, yes. Let's go deep. Let's go beyond that comfort zone of showing up in the way that we want to seem all pretty and shiny and lovely, and the prettiness and shininess and loveliness will come through. Um, hmm. So, um, I'm a father, a husband. I am just a being. The easiest way for people to know me usually is like, oh, he was a medical doctor. And I burned out, what, like 13 years ago now, 14 years ago. So I don't practice Western medicine anymore, but I have been trained in it. And it's allowed me to see the world a certain way. It's allowed me to be a keeper of secrets, a place where I can be safe for people both in their 3D body and in all this esoteric stuff too. So, as you mentioned earlier, I shaved my head. I had my head shaved actually. I realized it was time to let go of that story and that attachment. And it was so I could actually start fresh again. Um, and so, who am I? I mean, there's so many different ways to look at this. There's so many things that we do now, but it's just finding that fun in every day, finding the ways that spiritual work doesn't have to be serious. We can actually just enjoy ourselves through the process. That my own work and getting to this point in life has guided me to find people who want to rediscover themselves too. Um, and we can talk lots because I've been through the pharmaceutical world. I've worked in technology. I've worked as a coach. I've worked in the plant medicine worlds. I've worked in breath work. And now it's just how do we bring it all together and start from here, knowing that there's so many lineages before us, but we don't have to do things the same way. And that the system that we are born into isn't the system we have to continue to evolve. And how do we start fresh every morning going, you know what? What am I picking up that's familiar? And how can I actually just be present and here with myself and the being across from me? So I'm just going to stay here with Jessica instead of wondering and worrying about everyone else, because that will happen. Yeah.
It's one of your superpowers, actually. It's just like how willing you are to deeply listen to other people and how willing you are to give the being in front of you, whoever that is, your full presence. And you mentioned you came from the medical world, the pharmaceutical world, which is typically more of a rigid or has
Mm-hmm.
some rigidity to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you transitioned into more of these esoteric practices. What was that breaking point for you? You mentioned burnout. Like, what was that point for you where you were started questioning and started getting a little bit more curious about what else could be out there?
Um, it's funny all the ums that are coming up because of the nervousness of just being sometimes. The breaking point actually probably started like right at birth. Like there was a point where I knew that this wasn't the way I wanted to live life. And in the same token, I realized that I was really good at playing the part that I thought I was supposed to play, pleasing others. So I pleased others all the way. Like I remember when I was 7, I was like, oh, I watched the movie For Love or Money, and Michael J. Fox is playing this hotel concierge. I was like, this is awesome. I want to be a concierge. And I love my parents, so don't get me wrong, like I can see their greatness now. But they're like, no, you've got to do something that's, more grounded and more fitting of someone who has all the gifts that you have, especially intellectually. And so when I couldn't figure out what to do, I became a doctor. And in that whole process, I remember telling people, I was like, they were like, oh, I wish these new residents were like you guys were. I was like, you don't hear the scream in my head every day. Like it's screaming at me. But I couldn't listen to it because I was coming from the brain. I had to think things through. Until finally, like literally my body, my soul couldn't take it anymore. Um, Things fell apart in every way possible so that I found myself on my couch catatonic, like not knowing what to do and having to leave and breaking into a point of really suicidality, depression, everything that you could think of. And only there coming back, I don't even remember those years really. But in the coming back, when people were like, why don't you go back? I just knew that I couldn't. There's that rigid structure that didn't work. But I kept coming back to it because we're supposed to survive in this 3D world. How do we make money? How do we actually show up in a way that makes the people that we think we need to make proud of us? Until I kept breaking and breaking again. And then finally, even in this spiritual world, breaking and breaking again until finally it's like, oh, I'm just here to be me. I'm here to be me, and can I actually embrace me? And there are days that I still have trouble with that. Um, but now I realize if I'm having fun and people are growing with it, then why not? You know? And can I trust that voice inside that says there's a long way to go? Just take it slow. Be impatient, but take it slow as well. Yeah. So I can dive into it further, but that's where I am before I get lost in my own thoughts. So I'll let you guide
Yeah.
us today.
Well, I appreciate all the kind of the deep reflection of a series of breakings, but also a series of softenings that you went through
Hmm.
in order to get you to where you are. And you also mentioned just like play, you know, like let's have fun doing it. It doesn't have to be so serious. And I love that because I think that sometimes we get so serious into whatever it is, whether it's a professional career, whether it's being a doctor, whether it's being a person who delivers spirit medicine, soul medicine, if you're on a shamanic path, if but like people get so serious and it's like,
Yeah.
but it's all just play, right? It's all just play. And if we can find that 5-year-old self and just say, like, you're the only one I need to impress for the rest of my life, and you can find those moments where you just get to smile, the deepest smile,
Hmm.
and coming out of the rigidity that you went through and kind of going through that series of breaking, series of softenings, you've kind of come to this place where you're able to play on a bigger playground because you've got
Yes.
not only this background of knowing, like you said, the keeper of secrets, you've got this background where you know the Western medicine world, but now
Hmm.
you've also expanded your heart and your offerings into more of the spiritual world. And that spiritual world, like with quotations around it, can mean so many different things to so many different people. And there's no right, wrong, bad, worse. Like there's no black or white there. It's all a gray area. It's all a playground. And
Hmm.
so how do you start to knit your magic into the world in the esoteric space?
Mm.
And what are the offerings that you provide for people when you play in that space?
Mm. Knitting it together has been the challenge, because there's a part that can always see, I could do this better. Or am I still doing this to please someone? I've got a really loud inner critic who's gotten much softer over the time, but because of how smart I've been, he can sound really lovely, but he's just poking and prodding me all the time. And whenever I can take a second and be like, okay, I'm angry at you for having wasted so much of my life as a story. It's like, oh no, you've been helping guide me to here, so I have a foundation. It's solid. It's solid and it's not at the same time. It's like it's ever evolving. And so even evolving in the practices, like believing in the tool when I first encountered, because it was only as an adult at 36 that I encountered, spirit plant medicine, that I was like, oh, this is the answer. And over again, it's like coming to this is the answer as opposed to, oh, these are just some of the tools I get to play with. And now the biggest tool I play with is breath. But whenever I work with someone who's been in this space for a while, they're like, oh, you're not just providing breath. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it now. It's providing my flavor of it, talking through it, using the coaching I've learned, using the medical terms I've learned, using the physiology I've learned, using the parts where I've broken and come back, using the secrets that I've learned from others and their breaking and coming back. I've had the privilege of working with lots of people that people would be like, wow, they have it together. I'm like, they do and they don't, and that's what I love because they're willing to keep looking. Um, those are my favorite teachers, the ones that actually show up and find spaces where they can be vulnerable because they show me that that's what I want to keep doing. The further I get along this path, the easier it would be to say, I've got it. So I don't need anyone else, as opposed to I've got it and I want everyone else because they show me sides of myself that I didn't even know were there. There's still so many blind spots. I joke that I'm like a toddler in the space still when I offer the breath, when I offer medicine, when I play with it together. And a lot of it these days is how do I bring the breath and the medicine together so that you know the medicine's within, but you can enhance it with these tools. And then you have a semblance of control so you can feel safe. And the safer you are, or the safer you feel, the better you can surrender. And the more you can surrender, you can tell yourself, oh, I'm safe because I'm surrendering. And in that space, you get to wake up to that wisdom inside. Part of what I'm doing now, it's almost called Ohana Sage. Ohana for the Hawaiian term for family, because I see us all as family. Whoever I come across, it's like, how do I incorporate you as family without having to fix you, rescue you, anything else like that? And then how do I help wake up the sage in you, as opposed to create dependence that you think you need me to be more of who you are? And it's wonderful to get guidance at times. And as I guide others, I always remind them, like, I'm actually guiding myself at the same time. Like, it's the best work when I can be like, I'm serving you, but I'm really serving myself too. And that's the kind of selfishness that's there. It's like, oh, I just want to have a better life because the better I am, the more I be with all the parts of me, the better I can create a foundation for my son, especially. Because he sees through all of my stuff. And how do I actually find the spaces that are full of joy and wonder? Because every moment I'm spending, even right now with you, I'm not spending with him. So it's like, okay, it has to be worthwhile. And that helps me to see my own worthiness as opposed to, oh, this is a thing I can give away. It's like, no, every moment is precious. And the only times I actually really beat myself up is when I feel stuck. And I'm like, I just wasted some of the time that I could have spent actually enjoying life. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So much to unpack. One of the things that you mentioned that I would love to break down is the kind of voice inside the head,
hmm
person on the shoulder, whispering into your ear, like all these things. I'm not good enough. I am good enough. Like all the different um kind of positive and negative or shadow and light things that come in from that, angel devil on the shoulder. So
Yeah.
I want to double click on that. And also you mentioned all the parts of yourself. And so how does that voice have a um kind of a not a hold on, but a influence over those parts of you? And how does that come into cohesion for you?
Mm. So almost always when I'm working with someone, why I always love it too is I can be so present for them. There's a part of me that's of service all the time. When I'm of service, I'm having a great time. We've seen each other at Fit for Service, so you've seen when I'm playing, I'm just playing. I'm laughing, I'm having fun in the safe playground. It's when I'm on my own or when I'm triggered that I'm like, that voice takes over and I start to believe it. And why I'm grateful for that right now is that I've had the reminder that I've had such a loud critic that any time that I'm actually thinking, oh, I'm just in my ego and propping myself up, I'm anything but it's so funny that I can't see that. And so it allows me to actually step into my ego. It's like, oh, I am actually worthy of this. I am good enough for this. I'm actually amazing at this. And I can remind others to say the same thing to themselves because that's the thing we ignore is that inner critic and those other parts that are trying to keep us safe. But the safety we feel is how do we play in the system as it is as we grew up? Because anytime we step outside, it feels unsafe. I don't want to be the kid that looks like I'm different than everyone else. I don't want to be the one that gets bullied or pointed at. So let's conform. And I was really good at conforming. I was a chameleon there. And now it's like, how do I joke, I'm like, my work is to stir shit up. And I can see how beneficial it is when I'm stirring shit up for others. What I forget is when my own shit is stirred up. I'm like, oh man, why did that have to get stirred up? It's like, okay, That's just the next layer. All right. Every time I do something amazing, okay, my inner critic's in there stirring my own shit up so that I can actually see what's next. But I will forget for a moment and get lost in it. And then when I come back, I'm like, okay, it stirred up for me, through me, by me. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. And you mentioned you found more medicinal practices, or Eastern medicinal practices when you were 36. What was your first experience with esoteric medicine or plant medicine?
There were little things before that. So I had some friends who had some mushrooms. We were camping. I tried a little bit. I was like, oh my God, I transcend space and time. Like I can see things moving, all that stuff. But it was kind of more fun play, not really getting into it. I always say the first experience was um, from my fairy drug mother, I call her, because she actually was a PhD in pharmacology, and she worked with my beloved, my wife. And so when she offered LSD for my birthday, I was like, well, she knows her stuff. She's done it. Obviously, it's going to be as safe as it can be. Steve Jobs has done it, and I look up to him. So why not? And that first experience was the first time I actually felt the souls of other people. I could feel her soul. I could feel the soul of my beloved because we did it together. And it's like, oh, this is cool. And from there, it was almost like now we can actually start exploring in a safe way. Now we can start seeing how we can create containers. And I didn't realize the importance of it. And I did the thing that most of us do is like, this was amazing. Let's show it to everyone else. And then having things go well and having things go poorly. It's like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't really know these realms. And there was times that I felt like in Alice in Wonderland going, I'm falling off the cliff. That was like just before my wedding because I was so terrified of trying to control it all. There's a part of me that still says I can control it all versus I can trust that it's all working out the way it's supposed to. And I've got all these gifts to make sure people are safe. So even in the medical world, because you never know what's going to happen, it's like people will tell me over and over again in the ceremony, I'm dying, I'm dying. I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Call the ambulance. It's all right. You're literally sitting with a doctor right now. It's okay. Yeah.
Ah, okay. So also a lot to unpack there. There's so many rivers I could go down with you and Nick that
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is like my playground. Um, what you mentioned resonates so deeply, just the safety of the container. And
Hmm.
as people that hold space for others, that to me is so important. And you mentioned, being able to just like fully relax and like soften into play when you're in a
Hmm.
really safe container with people that you call Ohana or like extended family, chosen family.
Yeah.
And then, I think I can speak for probably everyone when I say, when you're in an unsafe container, whether that's in a spiritual world, an educational world, a family dynamic, like there's a feeling that you get somatically when you're not in a safe space or a container where you feel like you can fully express
Hmm.
everything that you need to express and fully like soften into the experience.
Hmm.
Um, can you talk a little bit about how you set containers, how you
Mm.
set the space, and how you really um, put prayer into it?
Yeah. So it took me a while to get to the place where I recognized what made it safe for me. And it's almost having to step into the unsafety of it to see that. And having said that, all the containers I've been in, I honor the people that were holding it because it's very easy to use your mind and say, that was bad, this was good, as opposed to, I chose this container to learn something from, and I don't have to keep going back to that same kind of container. And so my container that I set now, it is the foundation of it is safety. Um, and so how do I choose to work with someone? It's first of all, it's like, let's actually get together. Let's actually see each other and remind you that there's no attachment. Anytime before, especially you take any medicine, you can say no. I can say no. And it's a sacred no. Um, and without that possibility of no, we're not really saying yes. We're just going along with it as if we're being a good patient and saying yes. And so how I set the container now is we always do breath first because breath is the medicine from within. There's always the choice of raising it or lowering it, and you're never stuck in it. Like you can stop anytime during it. And you and I both know this, and it's beautiful for that. The second thing is I have one of my esoteric teachers also have a session with them so they can actually speak more from that realm to see how willing are they to go into this crazier world and have someone else see is like, is this the time? Are we the people to work together? And what else do they see and how else can they help make it easier? Because I recognize there's a part of me before that wanted to do the hard stuff. At one point I was almost like, give me anything you got, I can handle it. And then stuff happened. I was like, oh, I can handle it, but do I want to do it that way? And how can we choose to do it in the way that we serve? Because some people say, oh, I've got to help everyone I come across. I'm like, no, I don't. The goal actually is to help the ones that I can most resonate with, because otherwise I'm almost wasting energy when they could be with someone else as well. And so that's a piece too. How do we let that go? And then remembering all the other pieces, whether it's the location you're at, is it a place that we actually know that we feel safe in? Do we feel comfortable enough? Are we clear on touch enough that it's safe? Have I got someone with me? And I almost always work with at least one other person. The only time I haven't is when I know them really well and they're like, I can only trust you. I'm like, all right, we will do this for you this time. But it's because I hear that and I've tried every which way to say, hey, still, even then have someone else sit in the back. No? Okay. Um, because there's a part that the more people we can feel safe with, the more healing it is. The more we can realize there's other souls that we can trust. And having a man and a woman really helps, I find, because that helps to give that mother and father role as well. Um, and I'm not going to get into all the genders and all that stuff, but it's like I feel like there's a piece that that inner child that comes out still sees that polarity. Um, and so it's that plus also obviously every medicine I'm giving I've tried as well. I've tried this, so I actually know what's going on. I don't want to give you something that I haven't gone through while also letting go of what your experience is going to be. It's not like it's going to go through the path that I did. And then finally, it's continuing to receive. Every time I receive, I'm actually learning. And so people often say, how do you know how to do that? I'm like, well, I've received so much that now in the moment, I can just trust whatever is coming through. And they often ask, how did you know to say that? I was like, I didn't. The moment I thought of it, or it came to me, I said it out loud. Because if I think it, I'll modulate it. And even then, even when they say, you're such a clear channel, I'm like, I'm as clear as I can be at this moment. And always realize it's coming through the filter of Nick. So don't take this as the truth. Don't take it as do I agree or disagree. Just take it as how was it that my soul was speaking through Nick so I could hear it differently. And in that gift, that guidance, that trigger, how is this serving me in this moment? What are the lessons I'm learning from this? And over again, I remind people you're a sovereign being. Anything you want to do is welcome. The worst you can do is request something for me to say no. And can you feel safe in hearing the no's? While also recognizing one of the hardest things for me to hear is no or disagreement or something else. That's part of my own wounding. And so I remind people, it's okay if I get wounded in this. As I'm holding space for you, it's okay if I have to take a second. And I'm not going to pretend trying to be here and say I'm sitting here all stoic for you. At times I may be laughing, playing, dancing, burping, lying down. It's like I will be whoever I feel is called to be for you. And that's also why I want to have someone else there, because then I don't have to be one sitting at the head watching you the whole time. It's like someone else can be there. And then how do we create it so safe that I can even walk out of the room and be like, you're fully in your own space now and you know it's safe. And so the last thing I'll say is that I invite them to create an energetic bubble together. How do we create this container together so you know it's not just me holding the space for you, but you and all your guides holding the space for you too? Because those are the ones that you're going to go home to. And even though you know I'm there to support you, I'm here just to support you. You're finding your own way of creating your safety so that you can walk through this world and know that you can actually be fully you. Yeah.
Hello, sacred humans. Quickly, I want to share with you something I've added into my daily rituals that has me buzzing, and that is Rise Mushroom Coffee. Rise entered my life through my Instagram algorithm that obviously knows what products I like, and I gave it a try, and just wow, it has amazingly delicious flavor. Not only this, they also have a mushroom matcha powder. Phew, mind blown. And they're filled with superfoods and super mushrooms. What I like about Rise is that they use 100% organic ingredients, and their mushroom farms are located in California. If you've always wanted to try mushroom coffee but haven't yet pulled the trigger, this is your moment. And there is zero risk because they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're interested in the deliciousness of Rise mushroom elixirs, head to the show notes and you will find a link for 20% off your first order. Or simply use the discount code Jessica, all caps, at checkout. That's JESSICA, all caps, at checkout. And now, let's get back to our amazing episode of the Sacred Healing Podcast. So, creating the safest containers that people can realize that they are the medicine and they are the healing, and it's within them. And you and I went through one of the most, like, I don't even know what to call it. It was one of the most insane, spiritual, grounding, mystical, magical, like magician experiences that I've ever had. And that was in the ceremony with Matias de Stefano.
Yeah.
And you already knew what I was going to say. It was so otherworldly and ancient. And I would love to hear your reflection and your experience with what we went through. And then for those listening, if you could potentially set the container of what was actually happening, not only with everyone, but also with you being kind of the center point. I would love to talk about all of that.
Awesome. I thought you would. I listened to your first podcast just to be like, oh, who is this person? Oh, okay, cool. I get it. And that's when you mentioned his name. So I'll set the container of what looked like on the outside. I'd love to hear your experience first after that, and then I'll share what was going on in the center of it. So Matias de Stefano remembers all his past lives, does activations all around the world, especially Egypt. And so he has remembered many different kinds of ceremonies and bringing his own flavor into it. And so he decided to, at Fit for Service in Sedona, share about setting an activation container. And during the talk he was having with Aubrey, Aubrey at one point halfway through just decides to say, oh, and we're going to do this around Dr. Nick today. And so I had no idea this was coming. I'm so glad it came up halfway through because I got to spend half an hour going, oh shit, what's going to happen? I've had experiences where I've yelled, screamed, channeled, all that stuff. I'm like, what am I going to do? Am I going to like suddenly run around naked or something else and embarrass myself? And how do we let that go? Because I was like, okay, I'm not here to perform. I'm not here to pretend. Can I actually receive? Because I could really use it. I had been honest that week, thankfully, that I wasn't my full usual self, just bouncing around. I was feeling a little under the weather still, feeling my lungs still a little bit, and receiving so much. Like so many other participants had helped me with craniosacral, acupuncture, Reiki, everything, and I was so grateful for it. I was actually receiving a massage with essential oils when this was announced. And I was like, oh, geez, okay. And so I went through all the permutations in my mind that I could think of, and I let it go, and let it go, and let it go. And then when we actually set it up, Matias was like, okay, we're going to, well, Aubrey actually first was like, let's just do a small one so they can all see so it's easy. And Matias was like, well, we could do it with everyone. And I love that like 200 people in Fit for Service, all just like, yeah, let's do that. And so he set it up, and this is outdoors in Sedona. And he said, you, Nick, are going to be the proton, just like an atom in a way. I'm the proton. He asked for a divine feminine who felt like they had lots of energy, and there's a bunch of people that wanted to do it, and someone got called, and she was the neutron. And her whole job was to just send all the energy that was coming from everyone else and channel it into me. And then around her were two other women who became part of her kind of triangle, and then three other men surrounded them to create the Merkaba. So the Star of David, around me. And so there were three women, three men around me. And then everyone else were the electrons surrounding it in a circle, a concentric circle, multiple layers, standing, sitting around. And then Matias started guiding everyone to, I believe it was to hum, to move, to do different things. And this lasted, I don't know how long it was. Like it could have been 5 minutes, could have been 15 minutes, could have been 3 days. But apparently on his side, and I was talking to videographers afterwards, they're like, yeah, he was like running around doing all this stuff. And I was in the center of this, receiving all this. And afterwards hearing that there's lots of experiences for everyone else. So I'd love to hear your experience first and then your curiosities. And I'll also preface to say that I'll share what comes up now, but what comes up now isn't the truth. It's just what's coming up right now. And I've also learned that I've got to check in and say which parts are important to share right now, because not everything is meant to be said out loud just because you experienced it. And sometimes it's important to keep that gold close to center. It's not what you say so much as the energy you put out. So, yeah. Yeah. So, what was your experience? What do you want to share about this?
Well, first of all, thank you for setting that up so beautifully with so much precision. And also, thank you for having the discernment to share what needs to be shared and keep for you what needs to be kept just for you. Because
Mm-hmm.
it was a ceremony. It wasn't just something that it was fun, but it was also a ceremony. And it was really, really intense too. I would
Mm-hmm.
say one of the most intense energies I've felt. Um, and what I would love to add to this beautiful kind of imagery that you've painted for everyone about kind of where people were located, what we were actually trying to create, which was atoms, photons, neutrons, electrons, um, and basically being the cells of the planet to
Mm.
to weave energy into and to be vessels for energy. Matias kind of set everyone up, and everyone's like, okay, I got my place. Like Matias told me to get here, I'm gonna go there. Like whatever he says, yep, okay. And he's in the middle, and he's like, okay, I think we're good. He's like, I'm gonna jump out of the circle because I don't want to get caught on fire. And I was like, oh my God. He's like, I don't want to burn. And he was like, just kidding. And I was like, oh my God, what a perfect like way to like get everyone so serious and so in their spot. And then like right before we start, he's like, you're all gonna burn. And just like having that childlike play that he absolutely has. Um, for my experience, being one of the like many kind of people that were engulfing you guys with our energy in a circle. I was on the inner circle, and there were
Mm-hmm.
like layers of circles. So I was on an inner circle, and then there was probably two or three layers of people that were circled around as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt very much like in the goo of a cocoon. Like I was like, what's gonna happen? I am completely just surrendered because I have no idea. And part of me was like, I want to watch this. Like part of me was like, oh, I'm in this, but I want to see what's happening. And it's funny you mentioned that the videographer said he was like running around because I'm like, I had no idea that he was doing
Mm-hmm.
that, which is so cool. I just like, I wonder if there's footage of that will come out. That would be so fun. Um, but I just remember being like, nope, stay present,
Mm-hmm.
monkey brain, distracting brain, squirrel brain. That is
Mm-hmm.
like so me. Turn it off and like really get present with this ceremony and the intention of the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And really, we were doing a transfer of energy so that you, Nick, could feel better because you were
Mm-hmm.
feeling wobbly on the
Mm-hmm.
earth grid of yourself and your being. And so my experience was just go all in, send it, like really, really ground your feet into the earth and send the energy to the vessels that need it. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was really being I don't know, an in between. Like I was just a conduit for energy to flow. And what we were told to do was like to really like kind of receive energy and then like push energy back out. And so there was this really kind of like wave dance motion that was going on with
Mm,
all of the folks in the outer circles, and our eyes were closed the entire time. So I don't know what anyone else was doing, but my body started to move in ways that intuitively needed to move. Like it just, my body knew what needed to be done with the energy. And
mhm.
so, like you said, it could have been minutes, it could have been hours, it could have been days. I do think it was like hours, but it felt like a minute to me. Like time was not a thing during that ceremony. It just
Yeah.
wasn't. And at one point we were one of the prompts that Matias gave was for us to use our voices,
Mhm.
and using the power of the vibration and the frequency of sound was just so powerful because it's no instruments, it was just our voices. And if you
Yeah.
can imagine 200 people, well, you can imagine because you were there, but I don't know where you were. Um, 200 people using their voices in ways that are so healing. And we came to a place where we were in resonance and harmony with major chords,
Mm,
and those major chords were really doing like the actual healing because sound changes your body on a molecular level. And
mhm.
so that for me was so much giving and so much receiving at the same time. Like the amount
Yeah.
I received from that ceremony was just like, I'm blown away. Like,
Mm,
because I feel like we were giving you energy, but everyone got energy. Like we were
yeah.
all healing each other. It
Yeah.
just felt really, really beautiful. So that was my, mini reflection on. I could probably talk for 3 more hours about it, but that's just the synopsis of what I was feeling in that moment and what was going through, my mind physiologically and then also esoterically.
Yeah. So thank you for trusting yourself to say that and also keeping it concise in a way because we could talk forever and that's not the goal of the talking about it. The talking about it will always be a poor interpretation of what actually happened. And I love that you could say to the giving and the receiving. Um, they said ostensibly that it was there to heal my lungs. I've had lung issues my whole life, asthma, and then healing from that before, so we'll talk about that later possibly. But in that moment when I was first there, it was getting present because it was challenging to get present when you're in the middle of something and feeling like you're the center of attention and wondering what's going to happen and I didn't hear all those words that you just said earlier about how he set things up and his joke and stuff like that. But I love that because it's a reminder. Like what I love about Matias is he's like a little boy who's just full of wonder. And that's what he infused in the ceremony. Like he has the wisdom to create it very deliberately, very particularly, but then also just to play. Let's just play it too, because that way we can let go of knowing what's going to happen. And so in the middle of all this and just receiving it, and I did open my eyes briefly a couple times because it's like, is this actually happening? Okay, still come back. All right, come back.
Did
And
I
so,
die?
yeah, I know, right? Like, is this actually happening? Is this just a big joke I'm in on? And in the moment of feeling all the energy, the first thing almost was like, I knew that all 43 years of my life have led to this point. And having this moment now helps remind me, it's like, can I actually just show up and realize there are no mistakes? Like, everything had to happen exactly the way it did for me to be there. Any point if I'd chosen something different, I wouldn't have been in the center of that circle. And I am so grateful that I was. And then there's the ego that's like, why am I chosen? Am I worthy? And in that moment of letting go, realizing that I could take this, and how I described it to Aubrey when we chatted later was I could have taken all that energy and made a giant spectacle, like a neutron bomb. Like it would be like, look at me, I'm levitating. And it's like, it kept coming back as like, is that what you really want to show off? Is that what's important here? And no. And so it was multiple things going, no, 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 no. And when people ask, like, do you see these things? I'm like, it's not almost a seeing. For me, it's just a knowing. And then later on, it's being able to trust that what I knew is what I knew. And so receiving all this and realizing that everything led up to this point, the next thing almost was all my guides, and I've been told there's so many around me. I don't see them, but I know they're there because things happen and it's not me that's doing it. And they're almost smiling, laughing. They're like, can't you see why we're here? We don't see space and time like you do. So we always knew this was going to happen. And this is just giving you confirmation proof why we're so excited to be with you, because these things happen around you all the time. And so it's like, okay, thank you for being there. And then sending it back and forth through time, because it's like, oh, let's take this moment instead of like combusting it now. Let's actually send this back and forth through time in the way that I see it, because let's have this energy permeating all the time. And then not just back and forth through time, but through me to everyone else too. Instead of saying, I'm just going to activate my own channel even more and say, this is going to be a really loud channel, I can overpower everyone. It's like, let's actually activate everyone's channel, because then that's so much more fun. Because everything that someone else channels into me as well, and we can play with it. And so it was sending it back and forth. And then at one point, I started moving my hands as well. And I realized that I could actually shift the whole experience. The volume, the way people were moving, everything else, I could actually move it. And the moment I really realized that, then my higher self, or whatever you want to call it, came along and said, is that what you want to do as well? To show that you can manipulate people. I was like, oh yeah, can I just let this go now? Because why am I doing it? Like, okay, I could show off and say I can do this, and now can I just let it be? And it was almost like layers and layers of just saying, I'm here just to confirm things for you, and then are you willing to let it go? Okay, there's no mistakes. Okay, you can control things, but do you need to most of the time? No. Okay, now what? Now can you just receive more and more and more? And then, yeah, and then I will share this. And then the last part was, let's actually take all this energy and almost swirl it and create a perpetual energy machine. That's the thing that we forget, is that we actually have the capacity to do that. And then we don't have to keep trying to work and say, I have to do or put effort into creating something. It's always working in the background. And isn't that way more fun? And the 3D analogy is, people are always like, how do I get to passive income versus active income? It's like, let's also say, how do I get to passive energy instead of just active energy? I've got to do all these things to make sure my body's optimized. It's like, no, your body always wants to optimize. How do we get out of the way of it doing that? And then from there, I realized, okay, thank you for realizing my own version of my own story of why I've been chosen. Because it's always a story we create after the fact. And the story almost like, because I was like, well, there's people that are sicker than me. There's people that could use this more than me in a way. But I realized I was ready, having done everything I've done, to be at the center of this, to hold this energy, not burst into flames, to be burned or consumed by it, and also realize it's not just for me, because then everyone can benefit. And I'd love to hear if there's anything important to share after the fact, but one of the things I will share is, I remember talking to someone, one of the other participants, and she's like, even weeks after, she's like, I feel like I'm still on a mushroom high. And it was like, that's amazing. Like, I'm jealous of you. And I'm loving being jealous of you. And it's funny that when you're on that high for that long, you're like, is it ever going to end? And it's like, okay, it will end at some point in terms of that experience. But can you just enjoy the ride while it's there? And I think that was it. As I stepped in it, why it lasted forever, it felt like, was I was like, I'm just enjoying this ride while it's here. Let's not try to attach and say, I want this to go longer, or this is too much. Let's just be with it. And just trust that whatever's happening is supposed to happen. And why I said, like, there's no way that I could have paid for this. Like, there's no way that I could have ever had enough money to say, I want to create this relationship with all these people, because I knew most of them. And then there's some amazing people I'd never met before, but I want to, like Blue of the Earth and others that were there in the circle. And it's like, how do I actually just receive this and in a way feel like the king that I am? And I say king that I am because I think we're all kings and queens. How do we support each other's kingdoms and queendoms? And actually just enjoy this. And in the enjoying and the receiving and getting all these gifts, they're going to spread. Don't feel like being selfish is bad. Being selfish is one of the best things, because the more selfish you are, the more you're taking care of yourself and not relying on someone else to have to do that as well. So that's some of it. Yeah.
That is some of it. That is a part of it. And I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing some of the more shadowy things that came up for you and the more like ego things that came up for you, because those are really hard to share. And also, like, they're so relatable. Like, it's
Hmm.
so relatable to be like, I can control this, but it's like, no, no. Okay. Is that what you want to bring into it? No, soften a little more and soften a
Hmm.
little more and soften a little more. And so thank you for going into those parts and into the light parts too. And you also mentioned like there are people out there that are more sick than I am, but you know what? I was meant to be here at this exact moment in time because everything in my life led me exactly here.
Yeah.
And there's something so beautiful and synchronistic in that because we're co-creating our reality. We
Hmm.
are able to make our own choices and we're able to go down different rivers, but it will all lead to the same ocean. And we get to co-create that with the universe. And so this moment in time was meant to happen exactly as it did with all the people that were in that container. And so I feel really lucky to that my path led me to this ceremony specifically, especially you having listened to the first podcast episode. Thank you. We launched 2 weeks ago. Um,
Hmm.
and if you haven't listened, when by the time this episode airs, please go back around and listen to that because it kind of starts this amazing journey that I had a vision of Matias, and that was now 3 years ago now. And
Hmm.
it's one of those things where this past October had this beautiful ceremony with Matias. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, okay. Some dots are starting to connect a little bit more now because
Yeah.
part of the vision that I originally had was people standing in a circle and like basically holding hands, standing in a circle. And energy was being shifted and exchanged, and the elements were involved. And there was a lot of things in that vision that I won't fully go into. But it led to even more synchronicities, even more doors opening, even more dots being connected. And
Yeah.
so you never know where your life is going to take you. It's
Yeah.
almost like one of those connect the dots when you're a kid and you're like, what is it? What's it going to be? You know, and then an adult's like, it's obviously a unicorn. And the kid's like, but I don't know. I haven't connected all the dots yet. And so thank you for all those reflections. I I appreciate you going to the depths and also having discernment too.
Hmm.
So thank you, thank you, thank you.
And just to add to that piece, thank you for having this vision because I recognize that we're co-creating these things too. Like, I'm so grateful for my beloved because she's always, whenever she wants to meet someone or wants me to meet someone, it happens. And it happens in a way that she can't imagine. Like, she fell in love with Matias, and same as you, listening to some podcasts, she's like, oh, I really hope you get to meet him. And it's like, I didn't just get to meet him, I got to know him and really be in his energetic space. And apparently that night he was like, I need to go to that space where Nick was because there's an energetic portal that we created. And I love that because there's the give and take too. I want him to receive as well. That's one of the things I would love for all these people that give so freely to receive as well. And it's almost every time I look, it's just like, how did this happen? And now I get even more of a glimpse of it because of your intention you put into this. That was part of this happening just at the right place at the right time. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know how much you know about the what he did when he went and sat in that spot. All I know is what Aubrey told us, which is that he had to go sit in the exact spot that you were in during this ceremony. Do you know more than that?
I didn't get a chance to ask more than that right now. I already know that at some point I'll be chatting directly with Matias. I didn't get a chance to ask Aubrey more because he was there busy holding space for everyone. So if you want to enlighten us, please do. And if
If
there's nothing
anyone
else right now,
knows,
that's okay. Yeah.
type it in the comments. We need to.
Ex-
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And yes, I was thinking that this is an interactive thing. As you listen to this, please, if you feel called to share or there's something to add in, or you're like, oh, you guys need to go do this, let us know. Because there's a piece of this that, as a listener, you may think you're passive, but you're actually active. Whatever you want to bring in and bring out, it's going to move this path further along. So, yeah, why have it just be on Jessica and I to move this this conversation along? I
We
look
need
forward
help.
to, yeah.
Today, I want to share with you all the delicious cacao with a K, drinking chocolate. Cacao is one of my favorite brands of ceremonial grade cacao and is a delicious addition to my morning routine. Cacao is jam-packed with delicious nutrients that work with my body to stay energized, connected, and focused. What I also love about cacao is that they are a nonprofit on a mission to protect the native heirloom strands of cacao in both Peru and Guatemala by giving back to the farmers and communities that make it available to us. If you are interested in cacao with a K, go to the show notes and you will find a link for 10% off your first order, or simply by using the discount code Jessica, all caps at checkout. That's JESSICA, all capital letters at checkout. Would you be willing to share one of the deepest ceremonies that you've been a part of? And that could be breathwork, plant medicine, anything that you would be willing to share with people that has changed your life.
Mm. So give a little more context for where you want this to go. Do you want it in the sense of me facilitating, receiving? There's so many avenues, and I just want a general direction to point down because then we'll go down that avenue.
I don't necessarily want it to go anywhere, but to clarify, um, I would love to hear about an experience where you received.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So there are many, and we'll always know that. There's always more stories to talk about. There's two that come up. One is the first time I sat with grandmother ayahuasca, and one was the first time I sat with a stack of medicines, layered on top of each other, ending with 5-MeO DMT. I'll start with grandmother. That was in 2018. We call that our third wedding. Iris and I had got married twice, and that was like a month after our second wedding. And we had waited to do this together because I'd read about Tim Ferriss's grand mal seizures when he had ayahuasca. And I was like, this isn't safe. And then coming to the point of meeting someone who actually was a former university professor who had studied and done all this. And I was like, okay, I've met her. She feels safe. And I think that's the piece too. Like when we talk about safety, I was so grateful for that initial because there's so many opportunities I had and I just didn't know them. I didn't feel them. I didn't want to just jump into something I didn't know someone. And in this one, I got to meet her and have work with her that was just talk and energy work, and then feeling that energy work and feeling my whole body floating without having to do any medicine. So that was beautiful to have had that experience and so safe. And so we went to ayahuasca. This was in Nelson, BC, British Columbia, Canada. And this beautiful center called the Sentinel. It's wonderful. And in that space with Blue Thunder Woman, she served the medicine. And what was so challenging about it initially is I was still so much in my head, like so much more than I am now. And so the first hour or two, or could have been infinite time, essentially as ayahuasca took me off, I lost who I was, my name, being, everything, so that every time I breathed out, it was like I turned into nothingness. And there was no I in this, it was just nothingness. And every time I breathed in, it was like I was getting shocked by the CPR paddles, like it was getting shocked with the electric paddles over and over again. And finally, when I could actually sit with this even for just a little bit, I started biting myself just to hold on to reality. So I had this giant bruise here. And after that, it was going through all the different realms. And I thought I was going there to heal my trauma from medicine, but it took me all the way back to my birth because my parents had lost a son before me at 2 months of age. And that's part of our family story. And if you can imagine, back in the 80s, there was so much grief, there's so much unknown. My dad was a pediatrician as well, so he thought I should have known better. And there's no trauma counseling, grief counseling the same way now. And I got to see my own baby self and all the grief and the sadness and the worry that was around me, and all of that poured into my lungs. This isn't intentional on their part, this is just part of my journey, so it's not that I'm criticizing, but it was there for so long that my belief now is that it turned into the asthma. I had so much grief there, And that was me for the first 38 years of my life at that point. It was so much grief that I literally couldn't breathe. I had 5 medications I took every day. I had 2 infections every day, every year that required antibiotics. And before this journey, I'd been invited to stop my medicines, at least for a day. And I was like, oh, I can do it for a day. She asked for 3. I said, maybe a day because I don't think I'll live if it's 3. And she planted the seed that I could actually heal from that. And I didn't believe it because I'm a Western doctor. That doesn't happen. And the seed was also planted by Gabor Mate because I had read his book, When the Body Says No, The Hidden Cost of Stress, and realized there's a possibility of that. And just with that glimmer of possibility and letting go of this grief and trauma, because the room was filled with smoke as well, and they put me by the door because they're using grandfather tobacco. And I was like, I can't breathe. But I trusted that it was okay, and they kept the door open so I could get fresh air. And after I came out of that, there was beautiful imagery, all that stuff. What was really profound about this one, the first day of it, was that that was the last day I took any Western medications. And I didn't think that was possible. And that led to teaching breath, everything else. And it's just hilarious that it's led to this. I often laugh. I'm like, both A, I thought breath work was a waste of your money and time because who needs to be taught how to breathe? And 2, I was like, I will never do it because my story was always like, I have weak little lungs. I'm like the canary in the coal mine. You know, if anyone's going to get sick, it's going to be me. And don't worry, you're going to get sick from me because it's usually just me. And so that was the very 3D almost proof that I needed to believe that spontaneous remission, which is what we call it in medicine, versus miracle, can happen. And I could actually have something I could hold on to. And now I've held on to it so that I can let go of, oh, it means something if I don't take Western medicine. It means something if I don't get sick. It's like, no, I can still get sick. It isn't anything else other than a clue for myself. My lungs are my first warning sign. So I love it. Like, it's like if I start coughing, I'm like, oh, what did I eat that I don't think my body really wanted? What did I do that was stressing me out? Okay. As opposed to, oh, my lungs are coughing. Oh, what's wrong? I'm going to get worse. It's like, no, let's use them as a tool to listen to. It's like the best way to learn. And why I want to share this one too is the second night was way better. I didn't want to do it because I was scared, but I did it. And in that, I only got burned for about the first hour that I felt like every nerve in my body was burning, which is way better than nothingness. But then after it was the calling down to the soul of my unborn son. And we weren't planning to have children. But his soul came down and she said, what do you want to do? Because you've got 2 years. And to keep it short, literally 2 years from that date was his due date, unplanned. So it was like she was just giving me more clues that there's more than I can see in this world, and can I start trusting that there's something there. It's not predestined or preordained in the way that we think, that it's like I've got no choice. And there are clues that are laid down in our path. And the last piece I'll bring in is that's the first time as I look back now that I had a very distinct imagery of Egypt. I was called up for that kind of one-on-one session with her during the medicine, and it felt like I was actually in probably whether it's the King's Chamber or one of the tombs, and I could just feel Anubis and everything else like it was almost like a ceremony in Egypt. And I didn't get it at the time because I didn't look up any of the stuff, and I get better and better now at just trusting that it's coming up for a reason. So that's the first thing that I'll share with you. Yeah.
Great first ceremony. You got nothing from it.
Yeah.
I would love to double click on clues because the body leaves clues, our universe leaves clues, and sometimes we're not always listening or paying attention. And as you know, because you've listened to the first episode of the podcast, I've also had visions of Egypt. I don't know what they mean yet. I haven't been yet, but
Yeah.
I know that it's part of a bigger story that will unfold, and I'll know more about it. And I already know. It's just, when am I going to remember? And how am I going to listen to those clues to be able to kind of put all those pieces together to where they need to be? And also, there's clues on an everyday basis. Like you mentioned, okay, I just ate something. maybe I don't feel really good. What is my body trying to tell me
Yeah.
about how I'm treating it or about what I ate that it doesn't like? And how can we really start to deeply listen
Hmm.
and not listen with our ears, but listen with our other senses and our, senses that are beyond our senses, that are beyond the dimensions of reality, because we can start to listen to that. And there's messages there for us.
Hmm.
It's so
Yeah.
powerful. So your son was, so the due date was the day, like 2 years to the date from that ceremony.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And was your wife in that ceremony with you?
We were in the
Love,
ceremony together.
you
Yeah.
were in the ceremony together. Did she get any type of vision of having a child, or was it just you that got this vision?
It was just me. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So she's probably
Yeah.
like, okay, Nick, yeah, good one.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Like that's why, like, if I hadn't talked about it afterwards, we wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah.
She didn't get any of that, and it was important that it was for me to actually see.
Yeah.
We have different lessons that we're supposed to learn, but the other clues were someone else had sat up at some point, looked over, and saw like a beam of light coming down on me, and in a completely dark room. And then our facilitator actually that night had said she was visited by a little boy with black hair sitting on her bed. And she's like, "Where'd you come from?" And he points up. And she's like, "I don't know why he was there." But now she's like, "Yeah, like that was totally your son Sage. Like he was there visiting me, and she's met him since then now." She's like, "Yep, this is the being that was there." And those were
Oh.
all, that was pre me believing this stuff. That's why I love talking about it now. It's like, oh, I didn't believe in any of this. And it's the way it's unfolded to give me clues that can I keep believing more without holding attachment to it.
Mhm.
Like, I love that you say there's a knowingness. There's a knowingness of Egypt. It's come up more and more. And I love that it came up for you too. And it's almost like there's an activation that's going to happen there. It's the voice of the world. There's so much that it's funny history has taught us is like, oh, how did they create this? It must have been slave labor, all this stuff. It's like, no, like this place is sacred and we don't understand the technology, but just because we can't understand it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And
Mhm.
can we allow ourselves to let go of how we have to understand through our framework of how we built the world right now versus they could have had things that we don't even understand yet or technologies we can't explain and allow that to be a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, another one of the things that Matias talks about, and Robert Edward Grant for that matter, who we also met, who I was like, okay, I can go now. Like I'm good. Like I met Robert Edward Grant. I'm done. Like total fan. Um, but these are some of the things they talk about. And it's funny because after I had that vision of Egypt and Matthias was in the vision, I didn't really know that much about Egypt and I didn't know that much about Matthias at all. Like I had
Hmm.
seen one podcast with him on the Aubrey Marcus podcast, and that was it. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, that's all I know about that person. And then months later had this crazy vision of Egypt and he's there.
Yeah.
What? So then I'm like, okay, I need to know what's going on here. So then I get Gaia and I'm like, let me watch all of this shit. Gaia's awesome. I love Gaia. If you don't have a Gaia subscription, I will pay for you to have one. Um, Not everyone, just one person. But I'm
Like,
like, I get hit up
no,
by
just
like
get
300 people. Like, no, 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 you need to get a Gaia subscription because it's really cool to stay curious about what could have been possible. And I think Graham Hancock is another person that does a really great job from a journalist perspective of trying to like get a little deeper, uncover a little more. And,
Mhm.
lo and behold, we have places like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey that are like so much older than the pyramids. And it's like, whoa, okay, there's different technologies that have been happening for a really long time, hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions and millions of years. So the universe leaves clues
Yeah.
is the genesis of that. Um, let's talk about breath work because you
Hmm.
just started, well, you've been doing tons of healing modalities for a very long time, but you just started Ohana Breath very
Hmm.
recently.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear more about your offering, um, your kind of uniqueness and the I amness of your own breath work, and would love to, tell people how they can utilize your services because I think it's
Yeah.
really special what you're creating.
Mm. So I'll honor my teachers first. Yvonne and Lana Rados from Intronaut. They're the ones that really guided me towards facilitation and learning that, and guided me towards breath work and helping me see that was the modality I wanted to explore. And then I went and I trained with Robin Clements in Breathwave. And he has a very gentle, conscious, connected breath, which is really about meeting you where you're at in a very ceremonial, safe container so that you can actually find whatever expression needs to come through. And I love that for his, the first week is just receiving. So we receive breath work for 2 times a day for 5 days. And then the second week we were training, practicing, receiving, and giving. And from there, that was in 2020, the pandemic happened. And so I had to learn very quickly, how do I do this online? Because I'm so used to being in person, being with touch, being with my giant tuning forks that I received from Earth Tuned. My friend Josh Reff created them. And so they're these amazing tools. And so I was like, how do I do this without it, with just my voice and Zoom? And managed to figure that out because there was nothing else to do. And managed to figure out groups and everything else. And from there, it kept evolving and letting go of the old patterning where I have to do it the right way or the way that someone else has taught me, or that there is a better or less than. And so finally, recently, it's embracing Ohana Breath because I was trying to think of what is this offering? I love it where it's like we come as strangers, but we leave as family. Like people realize afterwards, like, oh, this container came together for a reason. We knew each other beforehand. And so Ohana Breath I'm launching this year because I finally have the who's, not just how am I going to do it, because I kept on getting blocked to do it. Like I kept on wanting to do it, but getting stuck in my own ways because it's not my gift to do a lot of the things around the creation of this. And it is my gift to lead, to guide, to support. And so in this offering itself, there's multiple layers, but the first one is the online portion. I want to create spaces where people feel safe enough to have their first experience, that they can feel safe enough, whether they're new, whether they're really experienced, to come in together. And so the initial offering is going to be 3 hours at a time. It's on Sundays from 3 to 6 every 2 weeks, Pacific Standard Time. And the reason for the time is that it gives enough time for the beginning for me to have a little bit of a talk to tune into what's here in the field to share. And that will usually be somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes because it allows people to ground in and to get settled. Often I feel like, especially if you're new, you're trying to jump into something and feeling nervous and saying, how do I perform? And I want people to really drop in and say, okay, I don't need to perform for anyone. Literally, like everyone's on mute. You can make as much noise as you want. How do you set your own container to be safe so you can express? And then from there, it's leading to the breath, which using whatever music, whatever theme wants to come up, will be there for probably around 60 minutes. And in that space, you can realize that it's not about breathing harder or faster. It's just tuning in and allowing yourself to receive the energy from those around you too. And that's what I love. Why I want this to be online is we have no limit to the size we can create. And I have seen visions of thousands of people together doing this as an opening. And then time afterwards for a little bit of deliberate sharing so that people can share something. And often that's where the medicine comes in for people as well. I forgot about the Shavasana just beforehand, really just resting in it. And allowing yourself to know that at any point you can get messages. At any point, magic can happen. And initially people told me, you've got to talk less, talk more, do all this stuff. And I realized it's always a play. It's always a dance. And people say, oh, I didn't hear what you said. And I keep reminding them, you don't have to, because my voice isn't what's important. Your own voice is the important thing. Often when I'm talking, it's like just to almost get you out of your head and into your body. And so it's almost psychospiritual somatic healing. We're working with the psyche, working with the body, working with the spirit, working with your emotions, all to create this healing space for you, to create this vehicle where you actually hear your own inner guidance more. And that inner guidance can guide you wherever you need to go. And that's part of it. The reason why I want to do this now is I've let go of it needing to be me. My first priority is to be a husband and a father. And so I'm not here to work more and more and more. I'm here to create spaces where people feel safe, to guide people. And part of the intent of this is as a family, we get to be a family of healers. And so there's already people that are with me. Marika, who you know from Fit for Service as well, she's an amazing coach, and I can't wait for her to do more of the follow-up and the integration. And there's Isaac Matthews who's coming out here to do a little shadowing with me because I can't wait to see him blossom in his gifts. And there's more and more because I want people to be guided to where they want to go next. The old way is this is my teacher, I must follow them. And now it's how do you make it that I'm one of your teachers? Your main teacher is always going to be yourself. And in being your own teacher, you'll be guided to who you want to see next. And I know that you understand this because I heard you on the first podcast being like, this is where I need to be. And that's what I want people to see is that they can actually see more and more, where do I need to be without knowing why, without saying that's the right place or that's the best place. Because that's how I used to evaluate as well. This person's better than this person. It's like, no, this is the person for me right now. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, where do I need to be and where do I not need to be too? Because I
Mm.
think the sacred no's are just as important as the sacred yeses. And so having that really deep listening to what's right for you rather than what's right for what everyone else is doing around you.
Yeah.
And does it
Yeah.
truly resonate?
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining your services and explaining this breath work. As you know, I love breath work and we've had the honor of just co-facilitating together. And I've just had a sincere privilege of seeing you deliver your medicine to people in, containers of over 250 people. And you're there with your tuning forks and your tools and your hands and just your loving presence and everything that you can offer your body work. Just like everything is just so, so beautiful. Um, and I do want to give you a reflection because after one of those big breath works that we were co-facilitating together recently in Sedona, I
Mm-hmm.
came up to you after and I was like, oh man, I need to clear it. I like just need my energy cleared real quick because that was a lot going on. And and you were like, yeah, absolutely. Let's get the sage. Let's go. And and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna fully trust. I just put my arms out and closed my eyes, and I was like, okay, Nick's just gonna do his thing here. And I've never had I've never done Bufo or had an experience like that, but it felt like that. Like to what everyone, and I know I can't say that because I haven't done it, but I will say it because people have described their experiences with Bufo to me, and I'm like, but that's what happened with just me standing there and there was a tuning fork and some sage. And so I like held my arms out and a tuning fork went right to my heart center and it like vibrated throughout my whole body. And I was like, hell yeah. And not to mention, there was also the sun shining on my face. There was vitamin D medicine going on. And my whole body was like, yeah, okay, cells like this. I felt like my down to my mitochondria, I was being like healed on a deeper level. And it was one of those things where I didn't know how much time had passed. And I remember opening my eyes and I was like, huh? And like nobody was there anymore. Like you had already gone. Like you were like, yeah, I'm good. But like I don't know how long I was standing there. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll walk away now. That was great. It's a funny experience because I was like, man, like after doing a couple hours of breath work and then facilitating breath work, I was so open. I was such like an open
Mm.
vessel that
Mm.
that tuning fork just like blew me to somewhere, don't
Mm-hmm.
know where.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes we feel like we have to do all the things in order to get to those places, but breath will prepare you for that. Breath will leave you as a vessel that is so open that you can get all of that medicine
Yeah.
in whatever way, right? And you mentioned
Yeah.
like the learnings will continue to come, like even journaling after breath work. I'm like, oh, okay, another download, right? Because you never know when it's going to come up. And
Yeah.
even after breath work, like a week later, you can get another message. So
Yeah.
it's really special, really special. So thank you for tuning
Oh,
forking me.
oh, I'm so grateful that you're sharing this now because I haven't heard that from you at all before this.
Mm,
And it's such a reminder because there's a part of my mind that forgets. Like I forgot that this had happened until you mentioned it's like, okay, I can kind of see that happening. And thank you for sharing how deeply you got to. Like, I love that we were in that fit for service container with Aubrey and all of his crew because it was so safe.
mhm.
That's the first thing. It was so safe there already that it was easy. It was effortless to do that. Um, and sometimes this feedback loop is so important because it helps remind us what's possible.
Mhm.
And it reminded me is like all this online stuff is really leading to more in person.
Mhm.
Like it's so like I love that you can get the power of online and realize you can do this anywhere so that there's no restrictions. And when you're in person, it's so different when you have the hands on, when you have the vibrations right there, when you have all the people around, you can feel the warmth, you can feel the presence of it. And then reminding us that the medicine, I love that it felt like Bufo. Like people will question you, especially if you haven't done it. And I've had
For
more and
sure.
more of the insights that the medicine is just this beautiful tool to help us see the view from the top of the mountain right now because we don't know how to do it. We're so disconnected. And I never want to lose access to this, but I also don't want people to think that this is the main thing. And
Mhm.
that's where I'm heading to. It's like I've gone from Western medicine. I thought I was going into the spirit plant medicine. And then what I've been guided to and I've had reflected back to me is like, no, where you're actually heading to is beyond spirit plant medicine. But can you trust that this is part of the path? And every time we move from one to the other, it doesn't mean that the old was bad. It serves a purpose. It really does. Like my son wouldn't be alive without Western medicine right now. And so it's like, how do we keep loving and respecting that and being willing to step beyond it and trusting that that's where we're supposed to be right now? Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and kind of getting back around to your ceremonies. You mentioned that you were going to talk about your experience with grandmother, and then you were also going to talk about your experience with stacking medicines.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear that experience as well.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how we got off track from that, but I wanted to circle back around to it because I'm like, wait, hold up. People
And
are
I'm
going to
always
want to
seeing
hear
if you
that.
want to. Yeah. So I was a purist when I first started. After I did the LSD, I was like, okay, we're gonna go to like natural stuff, mushrooms, ayahuasca, back to mushrooms. All right, just mushrooms. And then at one point, it was just like, why am I limiting this? And I felt safe enough. I was in this container where they were doing some trainings, and so I had 6 people facilitating just me, first of all, for this one. And it was amazing because I hadn't had my own private ceremony like this, and I was scared. And I told the main facilitator, I was like, I'm scared. Like, I've had some experiences that have been really terrifying. And I'm grateful I said that because your mind is like, thank you for saying it. We're going to take it really slow, really gently, and know that you're safe every step along the way. And 2 things he helped create it really safe. Well, actually, 3 things. And I'll say one part first, as we said this earlier. Whenever I have people set intents now, usually I remind them, what do you want? And what are you willing to let go of to make space for that? Because often we forget to declutter as well. So how do we let go of some stuff? So there's that piece. And then he reminded everyone in the room, is like, Nick is so sensitive, he can even hear your thoughts. So just be really conscious of what you're thinking. And it helped give me permission to be like, oh, I am so sensitive. And that's okay. That's part of my gift if it's a gift, and it's a curse if I forget that. And it's part of my work to create better boundaries still too. So and then the stacking itself, so we had some cacao with some mushrooms first, and then we layered on MDMA, heart opening, and then we had a lot of body work, and then we layered on ketamine to really drop in even deeper. And then when that had all alchemized together and almost was hitting its peak, and I was feeling so safe, heart open, receiving, because the body work I was receiving was so deep. Like most massage therapists would never go that deep because they would be worried about injuring you. But I love the person I was working with. She was so good at like almost following the path of the energy that was running away from her in my body that had been hiding. Like it's almost like those little pieces of yourself that are hiding. It's like, no, I'm just going to give you attention and love. And that's just it. Like in the outside, it look like, oh my God, she's really just reefing on you. And in the inside, it's like, oh, okay, she's just bringing it out. And I was saying out the colors that were coming up, the animals, octopus was coming up for sure. And then at the very peak of it all, it's like, are you ready? It's like, yes, I'm ready to receive. And that's when they helped me sit up. They're like, don't move a muscle because I was completely limp by this time. And they held me up and held me in his arms. So someone behind, someone in front. And then they served me the pipe with the 5-MeO DMT. And taking that was like going through the prism of light and going back to creation, like creation itself. And then from there, I could just remember there's just this little light tapping in certain parts around my heart. And I am so grateful for that because it was the trust of him knowing exactly where to go. And then suddenly the channel came out. And it wasn't just a gentle channel, it was a screaming channel. Like I screamed to the room, and I have a little bit of a recording of it, but it was just so beautiful because it was stuff I would never say. And that's almost like the clue. It's like, oh, this isn't stuff that you would say, so can you trust it now? And then from there, more and more came, and then I ended up channeling for the whole night, it felt like. And what was really enlightening later on is to see the parts of myself that came in. Because as much as I'd like to say it was pure, there's a part of myself that was clouding it, and I can better see it now. And so what I want to speak to, why that is that the next day I almost had a little bit of a shame hangover. That's what he reminded me. He's like, oh, you're probably going to feel that because you're going to like, I said that? Like I said that to you? Like it was taking away all the filters of what you're going to say to people. And it was so profound because since then, it's helped me to trust my voice. And it's helped me to feel safe because that was probably the most powerful experience in that sense. And I felt safe the whole way through. And how important is that? Because I felt so safe I could surrender to my voice. Yeah, so yeah. And now that's probably the main way I serve medicine if people are asking. It's always layering on breath, but then how do I layer on the other parts as they serve? And what is it that's needed? So most people say, I want to do this medicine. And instead I'll ask, what are you actually trying to get out of this? And then we can talk about what medicine I may think. And you can still have a choice. You still have a choice in this. And then often it's like, I want to get this dose. Like, why do we want to get that dose? Can we actually layer it there and then see when you feel like you're at the place where you want to be, why push it? Why go beyond that instead of saying, this is the experience I actually want this time? Yeah.
For those of you who don't already know, my husband and I own a coffee company called Gay Head Coffee. And of course, we drink our own coffee every day, and it's some of the most flavorful and inviting coffee, especially with the nostalgia of coming from a can rather than paper or plastic packaging. But I'm biased, so check it out for yourself. If you're interested, head over to the show notes where you will find a link to order your coffee today from gayheadcoffee.com. That's GAYHEADCOFFEE.com. Thank you all for your support. It means the world to us as a small business. I thank you for sharing that. Um, it seems wild to layer all those on top of each other.
Yeah.
But you had 6 facilitators and you were really trusting and you felt really safe. And there were people that were really holding the container for you. So that I think that that's important to say
Yeah.
into this space, not to say like, hey, everyone at home, go ahead and
Oh,
go ham on 6 different things layered on top. Like, no, there's safe containers to do that in, and there's trust and there's knowing who you're receiving medicine from.
yeah.
And also something about finding your voice as the outcome of all of that and not being afraid to express yourself in ways that maybe you hadn't let yourself express before.
Mm-hmm.
That is so powerful because, like you said, like the shame hangover,
Mm-hmm.
like I'll have shame hangover after podcasts. Like shame hangover is real because it's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, did I say that? And like at first I would get so critical. Like I had a podcast 2 years ago that I would edit. I would edit the shit out of that thing. Like if you go listen to my old podcast, it's called Blown and Vulnerable with my friend Svetlana. We had so much fun, but I would edit everything because I'd be like, oh, I say the word too much, or I do this, or I don't like this about myself. Edit, edit, edit. I was editing like crazy. Now I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, no, these
Yeah.
are these are not edited. Like if I say something and it's weird or it's not resonant, that's okay. Like
Yeah.
that's what I was feeling at that moment in time. And it was genuine and authentic because it came through. And if I don't feel that way a week or 2 weeks from now, it's because I learned and grew and got curious and found something else. And
Yes.
so I think the shame hangover with any type of expression or art or creativity or ceremony is so real. Like
Hmm.
it's so real. And so thank you for bringing that up because I think that that ultimately is something that everyone can relate to no matter what experience they've had in life. Like everyone's had
Hmm.
that time where they're like, "Oh, let me raise my hand. Let me say this," and then, the teacher or your mom or your dad or your sister or your friend or whoever is like, judgment, 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 judgment. And then you're like, oh, I have to suppress that. I
Yeah.
can't tell people that part of me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And I don't know if you have any other reflections on that or any other life experiences where you're saying like, oh, hey, like I actually found my voice.
Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that because often I share with people, especially when they're newer to this work, it's like if in 2 years from now I'm not looking back and going, oh, I can't believe I did things that way, there's a part that's like, it means that I'm not still growing. Because there's always things I can look back and said, I could have done that better. And I was sharing this with someone recently. It's like, everything that's happened up to now is perfect, but it doesn't mean we have to keep repeating it exactly the same way because we're going to keep learning. And when we know better, we do better, right? So, how do we keep allowing ourselves to step into the places where we have integrity with where we are in the moment, even though later on when we say we could have done better? And having that shame hangover is just part of almost the failure of the system, not the individual. Our system has been created to have shame. Our system's been created to have guilt. Like we're not allowed to make mistakes. When I was a kid, that was the way I got ahead, so to speak, or that I thought I'd get ahead, is by doing everything perfectly. And so I was always proud of not falling, for example. And I remember I was actually in my coaching course and I was getting reflection from a lovely uh, lady, and she was sharing how her dad, she really thanked him because every time she fell while skiing, he was like, awesome. He would ask her, how many times did you fall today, not how good you did today. And there's one she said, I didn't fall at all. And he's like, oh, that's too bad. And it's like, oh, it's such a different way of looking at things. And so now I will remind people, especially, yeah, don't go right into this layering thing for sure. Don't jump ahead of yourself. Stay within the container you know that you can keep safe. And it's not that mine is better. It's just the container I play in now because that's a container that I feel I can deliver the safest, most profound experience to someone when that's what they're looking for. And for most people that I work with, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in person, whether it's a retreat, it really is just breath. And it's not just breath, right? As you shared earlier, I love that. It's like, I felt like I felt Bufo just from a tuning fork and some smudge after having had breath and after facilitating breath. It's like all of it is possible. And it's just whatever that container wants to be. So I encourage you to feel the shame, even though in the moments I feel it still right now, it's really challenging. When I'm in the thick of it, it's still hard. And I still have the moments where I'm like, am I ever going to get out of this? Yeah. And I trust it more now because it lasts less and less time. Like it used to last weeks. Now it lasts hours usually at most. Thank you for hours. Yeah.
What are some of the other medicines that you layer on top of breath when you're in person, obviously? Your Ohana Breath is going to create this beautiful virtual container for people and also probably spread out into in-person containers as well, but virtual container with thousands and thousands of people. I see that vision too for you, and you know, I'll I'll double like I don't know, double that forward. I don't know, triple
Mm,
it forward,
yeah.
because I know it will happen.
Yeah.
Um, so when you're in person, what are some of the things that you're layering with breath, and what are some of the other medicines that you feel really called to work with? Because I've seen you work with I think it's Hape. with a
Yes.
lot of
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and seen you offer that. And just I'll let you describe some of the things that you're really called to work with, but what are other things that you do layer upon?
Thank you. Yeah. So for in-person, private, and even small groups right now, it depends on how much facilitation is there. But let's just focus on the one-on-one. Um, what I can layer on, and it's only after the first time. So I always want people to breathe first just with breath, so they know all the medicines there. Now, what can we layer on? Well, there's a few beautiful tools. Hape is one of my favorite ones. And what I usually do is I layer it on by me taking it on behalf of them. So I often focused on the on behalf of them, but I'm taking it for me too. It's like a beautiful medicine for me. So I get to have this amazing experience with them, and it will help you clear your third eye. It'll help you ground more. It'll help you actually be more aware of what's going on and help you purge what's needed to be purged. So there have been times when I'm spitting up, coughing up all the stuff as well. On top of the hape, there's
Well,
also
hold
in,
on. I don't mean to
please,
interrupt, but for the listeners that don't
yes.
know what hape is, can you
Ah,
describe what it is? Because I actually haven't talked to anyone else about hape on this podcast before, and I just want to make sure we're all starting on the same level.
sounds good. Sounds
Yeah.
good. So hape or rape, it's called as well. The reason why I don't like rape is the way it's spelled is not so fun in the English language, but hape is wonderful. Usually South American, usually tobacco based, almost like a ground up powder snuff with many herbs. Every tribe has its own distinct blend and multiple blends for different reasons. On my table right now, I have Sacred Heart Cacao, now Pink Rose, Aya Rape. So there's many different kinds. And so it's something that you use a little tool called a curape to push up for yourself, putting one end in your mouth, one in the nose, and almost pushing it into your nose. So it's something that you have sit in your nose. And you also have, I was actually gifted this one by our dear friend Shannon, um, to push it into someone else's nose, the tepe, to serve someone else. Um, and so this medicine is used to both ground, to clear the pineal gland, to elevate. It can actually bring back experiences of ayahuasca or other past medicine journeys or enhance it as well. So this is not truly a psychedelic. Um, for most people, it's not a pleasant experience. It's kind of a burning kind of experience. And for those who are really going into it and they have a lot of stuff, you can actually purge. So you always want to warn people that you can actually literally vomit with this as well. And I always laugh because some of the people I am closest to who've done lots of medicine are like, oh, it's just hot bait. It's all good. I'll have some. And then they're throwing up like, why am I doing this? What's going on? It's like, it's okay. Yeah. So that's part of it. And as Shannon described to me, he's like, if you swallow it, you're more likely to purge. If you spit it out, you're just spitting it out as well. And then afterwards, you blow your nose because you don't want to keep all the stuff in your nose as well. So it's such a clearing medicine. Although when I first experienced it, I was like, this isn't pleasant at all. Why would anyone do this? It's ridiculous. It's funny, the medicines, you don't usually choose them, they choose you. And so it kept coming back around. And so finally, this past year is when I actually really started serving it. And it's funny because I'll be going this weekend to actually a Hape workshop as well, because I'm like, let's keep deepening this process. It's a process that keeps deepening. And I've had so many different ways of it being served. And I've loved serving people because one of the things I've learned is it doesn't have to be hard, right? Like we've experienced all the different kind of medicines. Like it's how you blow it into the nose, how you set the container, how you set the dose, how you set the safety of it. It can be a very gentle introduction. And that's what I missed on my own because a lot of the people in the South American tribes are just so used to it that they just blow it in there and they blow large amounts. And most people are like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed by it. And now more and more, my intent is not to say, I'm going to give you such a big dose that you're going to have an experience and that you can credit me for it. It's I'm going to listen to you, and whatever you want to start off with, this is not your only chance to experience it. So why don't you experience it the way you want to first? Yeah, yeah. So that's Hape right now.
Oh, I appreciate all the not only what it is in its, form, in its physical form, but also what it can open. Like you mentioned, being a healing medicine for the pineal gland, which is
Mm,
like, oh, great. So I love the description. I love the science too. So
yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I've never done Hape. Have witnessed many people doing it, and also was, holding space when my husband first did Hape, and I was just like, able to hold space for him. So, um, yeah, I know that it's a tool in your tool belt that you are just so magical with because I've seen you weave the
Mm,
medicine. So, yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
No, I've been so grateful because, yeah, especially at our Fit for Service that we were at, it was the tool that we could use because it was, totally legal to do this as well. And so it was beautiful working with it. And then I remember one incident at Fit for Service, someone had gotten overwhelmed with this Hape experience. And so they came over to me and said, "Oh, can you help us out?" And I was so grateful because we got to see all the different layers and from that co-create a space where many of us, including myself, did a dose for him to help ground him again. And also remind him that he's safe and he's loved because he's such a powerful person and so well respected in the community. And I said, this is your reminder that you're allowed to receive too. And how beautiful it is that we can go back and forth, that you don't have to always show up as this is me. It's like this is me just as powerful lying on the floor saying I feel helpless right now. And you're serving all of us by giving us the opportunity to give you something and create this space together. Yeah, yeah. So, taking from that, there are many other medicines, and there's two different ways that I do it. One is I serve myself on behalf because some people are like either resistant to medicine, don't want it, or anything else like that. So, along with the hape, sometimes I'll serve myself insufflated, so through the nose, 5-MeO DMT as well. And so, what that does, instead of actually giving you this rapid high in seconds and lasting for about 15-20 minutes, is the onset's about 5 to 10 minutes usually, lasts for about an hour, and then it comes down. And so it's more of a meditative. It helps tune in. It helps make the channel more clear. It helps move energy better. And so a lot of people go back to creation or birthing with that. Also, if they want to, they can receive that as well beforehand because then their breath gets to meet it and elevate the experience. So it's not about giving a bigger dose. It's about, okay, let's give the dose so you can feel it and you can keep elevating it. On top of that, and usually it's one or the other, it's not both hape and this. It's usually mixed in just a little bit. There's ketamine, which is a beautiful thing to getting embodied in the body as well. Usually it's intranasal for that. I save the IM ketamine for intramuscular ketamine for deeper experiences that they want to dive into. And then as well, then there's cacao. I've got blue lotus here, tincture. Um, I'll sometimes take some mambe or what my friend Sean calls truth serum. He's the one that gifted me this, which is made from the cocoa leaf. Um, and those are the ones I can think of right now. The other one that we can use sometimes too is MDMA because it's a heart opener. And that can actually help open the heart even more and make it more expansive. Yeah.
Um, can I get Dr. Nick and Soul Dr. Nick, both of your part opinions on ketamine and um, like what for those who don't know what ketamine is, what is it? What are the ingredients and what is it good to be used for?
Cool. So I will not hold back, but preface this with, and you've said this in the previous, we're not medical doctors, we're not giving medical advice, anything else like this. And I'm about as far away from medical doctors as I can be. So I don't try to highlight that. I use that to share people so that they can know that I have credibility in the sense that I will dive deeply into something and I can pass the exams that we need to in this 3D plane. But in terms of knowing and actually remembering all this stuff, two things. One is I used it before as a pediatrician. So we actually used it on kids, so I knew it was safe there. And two, whenever I have any issues or questions about safety, I always talk to my friend. She's called the Dharmacist. She's the PhD in pharmacology. So I refer people there because she loves looking this stuff up. I do not. I no longer want to look up studies where there's drug interactions and all that fun stuff. Ketamine itself, a synthetic molecule that causes dissociation, but in higher doses can cause spiritual experiences, can cause hallucinations, can cause all the things. And it's non-reversible. So that's one of the things that people worry about in terms of risk, because you get too much a dose, you can't actually reverse the medicine itself. And so you really want to be clear who you're working with, that they're actually clear about dosage, about safety, about having everything that they need, and that they've used this enough, they're comfortable with it, especially if you're taking it in any form other than intranasally or orally. Because if you're taking it through the nose or taking it through the mouth, your body can help regulate the dose. That's a beautiful thing about anything you do in that form. If you take it under the skin in any kind of needle form, that your body has no choice but to receive, and that's how people can overdose. So be really cautious of that. Let's see here. And ketamine, the other risk for it as well is it can actually be such a pleasant experience that it can be addictive. So some people, we can talk to them like, oh no, I just use it for this. It's like, yeah, but you're using it every day, every week. And I don't try to judge because I don't know them. But I will speak up and say, just a caution, sometimes we can fool ourselves. Sometimes it's nice to take a little bit of a break. And I've even done that for myself. I was doing hape almost every day for a while and then realized, oh, it's time to take a break just to see what's there without it. And I was serving my breath with it, like me taking it every time, and realized, okay, I'll take a break just to see. Okay, all the magic's still there. All right, cool. Now we can choose when we use it. All right. With ketamine itself, I'm very cautious of for myself. I take it very sparingly. And intranasally it will burn, so it can be very discomforting, but it can drop you into your body much quicker. So one of the most powerful people I've worked with, she uses ketamine when she receives breath from me because she's like, I know I can get there. This just helps me get there a little bit sooner. Yeah. And so allowing that piece to really ground into what am I feeling in this moment? What am I really feeling in this moment, past all the layers of protection or past all the layers of armor? And I think it helps to almost get to your own inner truth, your own inner voice. Yeah. So yeah, that's some of it.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And also thank you for all the knowledge and wisdom that you've dropped today and diving into your personal experiences and your experience with Matias and your new breathwork that you are launching and all of the goodness and just the magic. Where can people find your breathwork? Let's leave everyone with your website, social media, where you're most active, and where people can find you and sign up for services.
Okay. Thank you for making the space for this. www.ohana, O-H-A-N-A, breath.com is the main place to find me. It allows you to sign up for breathwork for free. Your first time's always going to be free. And my intent for that is that it's accessible to everyone. So if there's any issues with accessibility, just reach out because that's easy enough. I want that to be an exploration for people to come into and a way where it's accessible to everyone wherever you are, whatever status you are. And that's going to create so much flow. So that's the big overarching umbrella. From there, we can dive deeper into personal one-on-one online or in-person journeys. We can dive into retreats. And if you're ever wanting to co-create a retreat somewhere, whoever is listening to this, there's a little sign up on the bottom there if you want to actually reach out for more information, because that's possible. And that's what I want to do. How do we make it so simple and so accessible? The second thing is I don't really use social media much. It's not my forte, but I am at soul.nick on Instagram, and my beautiful friends are helping me to create posts for that right now. And so I'm learning how to engage with that a little bit. And then after that, there's going to be serendipity, because if you reply to Jessica's podcast, if you talk to anyone from Fit for Service, we've all got a connection. So just know that if we're supposed to get connected, we're going to get connected. If you feel like there's something deep to go into, please do. And know that right now, actually, yesterday I was talking to some dear friends, and they have someone going through a very severe illness. And I don't choose to work with people who are very sick usually, because it's not where I'm trying to go. I no longer have the same ego where I'm like, oh, I can do it all. But when I'm called to, I'll reach out and say, hey, if there's something we can do here to open up the space for understanding that our esoteric and our 3D bodies are so linked that we forget, that we have been so long treating the symptoms of things instead of the root causes. And I will be standing here as living proof, going, when I treated the root cause of my asthma, the asthma disappeared. And I would have been very happy if it just opened the space for me to find my own wisdom for other Western medicines to have things be resolved. And I'd leave people with reminding yourselves, often we think we actually want the resolution. Like, I want the goal. I want to have this relationship. I want to have this level of abundance. I want to have this level of health. But what we actually say when I'm talking to them, when they reveal themselves through their words, is, I want to understand this all. I want to remember the triggers. I want to remember the trauma. And I remind them, what if you never got to hear that base root story, but instead got the life that you wanted? Would that be okay? And many people will say yes right away, and they say, take a look really, because your actions are not reflecting that. Because if in one breath you could resolve it all, and I have had one man who, we had a breath session, and then he wrote me later from the ICU because he had been intubated for a intracranial hemorrhage, was what they thought it was. But when he was discharged a week later, they could find no evidence of it. Like his initial scan and his final scan, he's like, during the time I was intubated, all I thought of was breathing like we did in breath work. And I was like, that's so fantastic. You know, I can't explain it. I can't understand it. And I don't want to. I don't want to, because that's the rabbit hole I go in to try to understand that, versus let's just keep creating more spaces where it's possible. Yeah. And having fun with this magic. So yeah, reach out, have fun. Please reply to this podcast to Jessica if you have anything about Egypt. I've been called to go there twice this year for sure, to lead once and to go once. Please reach out to us if you have questions about any of the medicines and experiences. And remember to listen to yourself for safety. That's the biggest thing I remind people. There's no rush to dive into this. Like, sure, rush to dive into breathwork if you want to, because that's a place to go. And be gentle with yourself, because every experience is going to be different. Yeah.
Aho. Um, Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It has been so wonderful to get to know you over the past year. Feels like it's been longer, but
Hmm.
I guess it's been a little over a year. It's been really lovely to just get to know you on a deeper level and connect, to
Yeah.
connect and to deeply listen to each other and to explore and to play. I love that it all comes back around to play,
Yeah.
because what are we doing in this life if we're not playing, if we're not having fun? Right? It can be serious, but it can be fun too. And
Yes.
so thank you for being a friend. Thank you for being a breath worker, and a medicine man. I appreciate you coming on the show. And I will link everything in the show notes. So if you guys want to easily get to Nick's website, I will link that right in the show notes for you. So head there. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.